"You're useless now. Get out of the car this instant." The words sliced through the air like a sharp blade. The silence inside the vehicle was broken by the click of the door unlocking. The father, with his head lowered, felt humiliation pierce straight into his chest. The mother, holding back tears, looked at her children as if begging for one last sign of kindness. But mercy never came. The foreign car, with cold air blasting inside, felt like a whole other world compared to the burning heat outside on the empty road. The two, elderly, frail and worn out, were nearly shoved out. Dust rose as the door slammed, followed by the growl of the engine. The oldest son turned the wheel with disdain and, before speeding away, spat out his final words. "Figure it out! We don't owe you a thing." The car shot forward, leaving behind nothing but the smell of fuel, the haze of dust, and two motionless bodies standing by the roadside. The mother, Maria, clung to her husband's arm, searching for strength to stay on her feet. They really did this, Antonio." Her trembling voice sounded like that of a lost child. The old man drew a deep breath, closing his eyes. The wrinkles on his face weren't just age. They were scars carved by a life of hardship. "They did, Maria. They did. And now we have to walk." They started moving, dragging their feet along the shoulder. The sun beat down without mercy, as if the sky itself witnessed the disgrace. Each step felt heavier than the last, not only from tired bodies, but from the crushing weight of rejection. Behind them, the dust still floated, like the shadow of children who had chosen ungratefulness. As they walked, Maria couldn't hold her tongue. How could they, Antonio? After all we did, after sleepless nights, splitting food, patching clothes so they could study, how could they toss us aside like garbage? Antonio didn't answer right away. His eyes locked on the horizon where the road vanished into nothing. He knew every word she spoke was true, but also knew there was no turning back. That act wasn't born from sudden anger. It was the result of years of distance. They forgot Maria. They forgot where they came from. But one day they'll remember. The words sounded mysterious. Maria wiped her tears, not understanding what he meant. Meanwhile, inside the car, already far away, the atmosphere was cold. The eldest, Roberto, stared at the road ahead, showing no guilt. Beside him, the middle daughter, Clara, scrolled on her phone, laughing at messages as if nothing had happened. In the back seat, the youngest, Paolo, gazed out the window, uneasy, yet too afraid to speak. "It had to be done," Roberto said firmly. "They're just a burden. They hold us back. Better this way." Clara nodded in agreement. "They were dead weight, Roberto. It was time. Who told them to get old like that? That's life. Everyone for themselves." The youngest stayed quiet, his silence sliced by his sister's laughter. A knot formed in his chest, but he swallowed hard. He didn't want to be the only one to object. On the roadside, Antonio and Maria walked with no destination. Cars rushed past, fast and careless, some drivers even staring, but none stopping. No one guessed the cruelty hidden in that scene. The old man's legs trembled. Sweat streamed down his face. "Let's stop a moment, Maria," he muttered, spotting the weak shade of a scrawny tree. They sat on the hard ground, leaning against the thin trunk. Maria sobbed softly, unable to hold back. Antonio closed his eyes, and for a brief moment memories hit strong. Their children, still small, running around their modest home, the innocent smiles of those who hadn't yet learned the cruelty of life. "How did it come to this?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. Maria gripped his hand tightly, as if clinging to the last piece of dignity they had. "Antonio, if life brought us here, then it's because there's still something left for us to do. We can't give up now." The old man breathed deeply and nodded, but his eyes carried something else, a secret, something he had never told anyone, not even her. Back in the city, the children parked in front of their luxurious house, proudly displayed as proof of success. None of them imagined that their act of abandonment would spark a turn of fate that would change everything, because those parents, seemingly weak and broken, carried a past no one there knew. A past holding the key to a hidden fortune built far away from the eyes of their children, And that road, witness of humiliation, would also be the first step toward the truth to come. The sun burned like red iron on their skin as the road grew eerily quiet, almost threatening. Heat rippled off the asphalt, making the horizon shimmer, as if reality itself were ready to crack. Maria pressed her lips together, choking back the sob, her eyes fixed on the endless stripe of road. "Antonio, what if no one stops?" He took his time before answering. He held her hand, the same hand that once held the whole family together, and enclosed it between his. "Someone always stops, Maria. The world isn't always as cold as ours." An old truck appeared slowly, heavy, worn, groaning as if it too carried the weight of a hard life. As it came closer, it slowed, blinked its headlights twice, and pulled onto the shoulder with a hiss of air. The door creaked open. A man with stubble and kind eyes leaned out of the window. "You folks all right, Mr. João and Mrs. Maria?" Maria's eyes widened. How do you know our names?" The man gave a faint smile, unhurried. "I'm Dimas. I unloaded plenty of goods at your grocery store back on that old dirt road. You might not remember me, but I remember the little credit notebook, and how you cut thicker slices of bread for those who had no coins." Antonio stiffened, caught off guard by the memory. The grocery had been gone for years, swallowed by a new avenue and rents that rose like a raging tide. But Dimas's words lit a spark in the middle of darkness. "Climb in. I won't leave you under this sun." They hesitated, glancing at the plain interior of the truck. It didn't feel dangerous. It felt human. Antonio helped Maria up. Dimas handed her a small water bottle, which she held with both hands, sipping carefully, as if afraid to wake from a dream. "Have you walked far?" "Farther than these legs can handle, Dimas," Antonio answered with a bitter kind of humor. The truck rolled forward again, moving at the pace of their weary breaths. From the radio, static from a poorly tuned station filled the air. Dimas turned the volume down low, then ventured, "I know it's not my business, but what happened?" Maria swallowed hard. She looked at her husband, asking for permission. "They left us here." "Who?" "Our children," Antonio said clearly without hiding. Dimas didn't mask his shock, but he also didn't spill pity. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, as though fighting back curses at such injustice. "Not everyone born from our blood understands what family means." The truck drove a few more miles until reaching a modest gas station, one of those lost in the middle of nowhere, with a short roof for shade and a tired fan buzzing in the corner. Dimas parked by the pump, spoke briefly with the attendant, then came back. "I'll fill up and take you to Mr. Agenor's diner. He's a good man. Hot coffee, chairs with a backrest. Better than the burning ground outside." Maria clasped his hand. "Thank you. May God repay you. Life is the one that pays, Mrs. Maria, and life doesn't usually forget." The words settled on the back of Antonio's neck like an old hand. Memory. Life has memory. He lowered his eyes, as if staring at something no one else could see. Dimas noticed the hidden depth, but didn't press. At the diner, the smell of simple, honest food welcomed them with a dignity their own family had denied. The counter was worn wood. The clock on the wall pointed to an hour that had already passed. Mr. Agenor, a thin man with sharp but gentle eyes, placed 2 plates without a single question. Dark beans, fluffy rice, a slice of meat with light sauce, and a hint of garlic. "Sit in the corner. The fan makes more noise than breeze, but the shade's decent." Maria ate in silence, breathing deeply between each bite, as if chewing was a way of surviving. Antonio, meanwhile, seemed to chew on memories. Between bites and sips of water, he kept glancing at the window where the road stretched on without regret. When they finished, Mr. Agenor walked over with 2 tiny cups of coffee. "I know you. The grocery from the old district, right? You helped a lot of folks when the flood took half the homes. I remember you handing out baskets, bringing soup. The world spins, but it's strange to see it spin this way." Antonio nodded slowly. "The world spins, and it tests the backbone, Mr. Agenor." The restaurant owner leaned on the counter, thought for a moment, then pulled from a drawer a bundle of papers held with a rubber band. Maybe you don't know, but I keep things. Old bills, notes, names of folks who passed through needing help. Sometimes someone comes back asking. Sometimes fate brings good people back around. He flipped through the stack until he found a grey card, yellowed on the edges. Here, look. This goes back years. A place called Salgado Registry in the neighboring district. When they were widening this highway, an engineer who ate here every day mentioned that some strips of land would need easements, rights of way, passages, you know. And I recall Mr. Antonio talking with him a few nights late. Did you ever register something back then? Maria turned to her husband, startled. Antonio? His fingers trembled lightly. It wasn't fear, it was the weight of what he had chosen to keep quiet. I did, Agenor. Just a small thing at the time. A quiet deal with the engineer for a narrow strip of land nobody wanted. Folks said it was worth less than weeds. I thought it might be worth more one day. And was it? Maria's question came out as a whisper, almost guilty. Antonio drew in a deep breath. The buzz of the fan, the clink of glasses, the slow shuffle of someone heading to the restroom, all of it faded. I don't know. I never checked after the grocery closed. I tucked the record into a blue canvas folder and left it there. I was ashamed to feel joy in the middle of loss. Afraid hope would turn into a fight. Demas, who had been standing nearby, widened his eyes. Mr. Antonio, the neighboring district grew too much. They've even talked about doubling the highway, building an exit, adding access to an industrial park. If you hold an easement right there, this could be something huge, really huge. Maria covered her mouth, holding back a gasp. And the kids, they never knew? Antonio looked away. I told one of them, years ago, the eldest. I asked him to keep it quiet until the right time came. The memory carried a bitter taste. Roberto, the son who had just driven away with such coldness, was the first to know. Back then, he promised care. But then came the rush, the greed, the new friends, the trips, the speeches about what's worth it and what isn't. Loyalty got shoved into a drawer. And why didn't you ever touch it? Demas pressed. Because wealth that tears a family apart isn't wealth. I wanted them to understand before touching it. I wanted family to mean more than a paper. A heavy silence settled over the table. It wasn't only the secret itself, it was the shadow it cast. Maria set down her cup, still warm, and stared at her husband with eyes that mixed love, pain, and a spark of righteous anger, the anger of someone who craves justice. Then it settled. We're going to the registry, Antonio. Today. If the world wants to test us, we'll answer with the truth. Mr. Eugenor grabbed the keys to his old car, the one he used for errands. I'll take you. Salgado Registry closes at 5. If traffic behaves, we'll make it. Demas reached for the bill, but Agenor waved him off. You don't pay what destiny itself arranges. They hurried out. Agenor's car had a torn seat and smelled of gas, but started at the first turn of the key. Seen through a dirty windshield, the road didn't look as cruel anymore. Maria clutched the edge of her dress tightly. Antonio pressed his knee with his hand, trying to keep what little calm remained. On the way, they passed a new, shiny sign marking Business District just a few miles ahead. Trucks rolled in and out. Warehouses were rising. Machines hummed behind green barriers. Maria and Antonio exchanged a glance. No words were needed. They understood. The land once called worthless had found its moment. When they arrived at the registry office, the old facade contrasted with a fresh sign. A glass plaque read, Salgado Registry, Property and Title Records. Inside, a tired air conditioner fought the heat. The young clerk at the desk looked up from her computer and greeted them politely. How may I help you? Antonio opened his mouth but couldn't speak. His heart thudded in his throat. Maria stepped forward in his place. We'd like to check an old record. A right-of-way more than 20 years old. The clerk typed, asked for names, approximate dates, any clue. Antonio, voice low, said, Search for Faisha de Serra, Lot 14B. She frowned, typed, waited. The blinking cursor looked like a nervous heartbeat. Then suddenly her eyes widened. I found it. Maria squeezed Antonio's hand. Dimas and Agenor, standing behind them, held their breath. The clerk bit her lip, pushed back her chair, and walked to a metal cabinet of old files. She returned with a brown folder, stamped, and set it on the counter carefully. There are recent addendums. The lot was reappraised when the industrial district was approved. Along with the easement, it shows here, proportional participation in access and maintenance revenues. Participation in revenues? Maria repeated, stunned by the sound of the words. The clerk nodded. It's all documented, including updates for amounts owed, plus back payments. Antonio closed his eyes. Life, with its sharp memory, had returned. But this time, unlike the road, it wasn't here to wound. It was here to reveal. "Can we see the full documents?" he asked, his voice steady now. "You can, but there's a note you need to read carefully. It concerns who's entitled to receive." A chill ran down Maria's spine. "Who's entitled, miss?" The clerk drew a breath, opened the folder, pulled the observation page, and read aloud with the weight of someone opening a heavy door. "The original holder established in private deed restrictions on transfer to direct descendants in case of clear abandonment." The word abandonment rang through the office like a bell. Dimas looked straight at Antonio. Mr. Agenor stroked his chin slowly. Maria placed a hand over her chest, searching for breath. The whole world fit inside the silence that followed, and at the edge of fear, a new light was born. Not vengeance, but justice. "Bring everything," Antonio said. "Today we remind life it wasn't wrong to remember us." Outside, the afternoon began to cloud, and as the first shadow touched the registry's sign, the steps that once left parents behind on the roadside, unaware, were already walking toward what they feared most, the inheritance of their own choice. The registry felt like a temple of silence. Every keystroke from the clerk sounded like a gavel striking fate. Maria, eyes wet, watched the brown folder open on the counter. Antonio, standing firm despite his fatigue, now carried a weight that came not from age, but from the truth he had always kept. The clerk returned with a stack of papers and placed them before them. "These documents show the original record and all subsequent updates. There is a clear mention of Mr. Antonio's name as the holder of the easement, along with the added participation in revenues when the district was approved." Maria ran her fingers across the folder, as if the paper itself carried warmth. "So it's true." Antonio took a deep breath. "Yes, the piece of land everyone swore was worthless. Today it's worth more than anyone could imagine." Dimas, leaning against the wall, widened his eyes. "Mr. Antonio, this could be worth millions. I'm not exaggerating." The word fell like thunder. Maria covered her face in shock. Antonio, however, stayed calm. Deep down, he had always known life had this irony. It tested patience before revealing the reward. Meanwhile, across town, Roberto, the eldest son, felt a strange unease. Sitting in his office, flipping through his company papers, he couldn't focus. That moment on the road wouldn't leave his mind, not out of regret, but because of the memory of the secret. He was the only one Antonio had told, years ago, about the record. It had been a short talk, on a Sunday afternoon, back when he still lived at home. Antonio, tired of holding everything in, had whispered, "One day, this land might be worth something. Keep it quiet, but don't tell anyone. It's not the time." Young and ambitious, Roberto had heard it like a prophecy, but he never took it seriously. He thought his father dreamed too big, that the patch of dirt was nothing but weeds. And now, after their cruel abandonment, the memory cut back into him like a knife. What if they went to the registry? What if that land really is worth what people said? He shot up from his chair, startling his secretary. "Get the car ready. I need to go." Back at the registry, Maria and Antonio sat on old padded chairs while the clerk organized copies. Agenor, standing nearby, commented, "Do you realize what this means? This paper gives you power. And power, after humiliation like that, is more than justice. It's life paying back with interest. Maria breathed deeply, trying to process it all. To think that this morning I thought I'd die forgotten by the roadside. Antonio squeezed her hand. No, Maria, this morning we died to our children, but now we're reborn for ourselves. The clerk returned with a neat new folder. These are the certified copies. I recommend seeing a lawyer to calculate the amounts. The registry can't do that, but the back payments may be considerable. Back payments? Maria asked. Yes, according to the records, you're entitled to a share that has been accumulating for years, since the district's approval. And since nothing was withdrawn or transferred, the amount has only grown. Maria almost dropped her coffee. You mean it's already saved? Saved and earning, the clerk confirmed. Antonio's heart pounded heavy. He didn't show shock, but inside him was a storm of relief and sorrow. Relief that life hadn't been as cruel as it seemed. Sorrow because his children had no idea they had spat on their own treasure. On the road to the registry, Roberto drove fast, his face tight. Clara, his sister, had joined him at the last minute. Why the rush, Roberto? Because Dad might have gone to dig into that land matter. And if he did, we need to secure our share. Clara laughed, mocking. After what we did today, you really think they'll include us in anything? Wake up, brother. If there's inheritance, it's already lost to us. But Roberto shook his head. I know what I'm talking about. He told me about the record, years back. If I let this go, everything will be passed to other hands, and I won't be left out. The car cut through the highway like an arrow, drawing closer and closer to the registry. Inside the building, Maria stepped outside for air. She sat on a concrete bench in front of the office, staring at the sky now covered with heavy clouds. Antonio, do you think life can still give us peace? He sat beside her. Maria, peace doesn't depend on what we own. It depends on how we bear what life does. And today I feel we endured to the end. She laid her head on his shoulder, emotional. That was when they heard the screech of tires. Roberto and Clara rushed out of the car, heading straight toward the registry. Their eyes burned with urgency, not remorse. Maria's eyes widened. Antonio, they came. The old man clenched his fists. Then Maria, let the truth be told. The iron gate of the registry screeched as Roberto and Clara stormed in. Their firm footsteps echoed on the cold floor, drawing everyone's attention. Maria, still seated outside, clutched Antonio's arm tightly. He rose slowly, his gaze as hard as stone. Father! Mother! Roberto called out, as if his voice carried reconciliation. But there was no tenderness, only hunger for what was hidden. For a moment, Maria almost believed he came to apologize. Her mother's heart always longed to forgive, always searched for a flicker of love in her children's eyes. But the illusion shattered instantly. Roberto stretched out his hand, not to embrace them, but to snatch the folder of documents Antonio held tightly against his chest. That's what I came for. Hand it over. The silence inside the registry grew heavy. Clara, arms crossed, added, You can't hide this from us. We're your children. We have rights. Antonio held the folder tight against his chest, like a locked safe. Rights? Do you even know what that means, children? A right is taking care of those who cared for you. A right is reaching out when the road swallows someone whole. A right is remembering the bread that was shared when there was nothing else. That's a right. What you did this morning was something else. It was abandonment. Maria wept softly, but her voice carried steel as she whispered, You threw us away like old rags, and now you come running back because of papers. Roberto drew a deep breath, struggling to contain his anger. I always knew about that land. You told me, Father. I kept the secret like you asked, and now you want to cut me out. That's not fair. Antonio's gaze locked on him. I asked you to keep the secret until the right time, not so you could use it against us. And today, Roberto, the right time has come. But not for you. Clara stomped her heel, impatient. You're old, tired. You can't handle this anymore. If you keep it in your hands, you'll lose everything. We can manage it, grow it, keep it alive. It was Agenor, the restaurant owner who had helped them, who answered, raising his firm voice. Grow it for who, young lady? For you, who left your parents under the sun. You don't have the decency to talk about continuity. What you lack isn't youth, it's character." Clara's face turned red. "You have nothing to do with this." "Oh, I do," Agenor stepped forward. "I do, because I saw these two arrive here sweating, humiliated, starving after being thrown away. And I also saw the spark in their eyes when life showed it still remembers. If justice exists, it begins here." Demas, the truck driver, added with arms crossed, "You don't know what you've lost. Money can come and go, but anyone who dumps their parents on the side of the road has already spent the most valuable thing they had, their honor." The whole office seemed to breathe together. The clerk watched from afar, not daring to interrupt. Maria stood, wiping her tears with the corner of her dress. She walked toward her children with slow steps, heavy with pain. "Do you remember the nights I stayed awake sewing so you'd have clean uniform? Do you remember your father selling his grandfather's watch to buy medicine when you were sick? Does all that mean less now than this bundle of papers?" Roberto tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Clara looked away, unsettled. Antonio opened the folder, pulled out one of the documents and raised it high, showing the red official stamp. Undeniable. "It says right here, in case of clear abandonment, direct descendants lose the right to any share. I didn't make that up. Life itself made me prepare for what could come." The silence cut like a blade. Roberto stepped forward, trying to argue. "Father, listen. What happened on the road was a mistake. We were upset. But we're still your children. You can't erase that." Antonio breathed deeply, steady. "Being a child isn't just about sharing blood. Being a child means not turning your back. You chose the side of the road where the dust swallows. Now live with the consequence." Clara raised her voice, nearly desperate. "You're really going to leave all this to outsiders, to people from the outside?" Maria looked at Agenor, then at Demas. Her face lit up with a new kind of courage. "Outsiders. Outsiders were you when you abandoned us. These two men who barely knew us gave us more love in one day than you did in years. If we have to choose, we'll choose those who lifted us up, not the ones who pushed us down." Roberto clenched his fists, frustrated. "You can't do this." "Oh, yes, we can," Antonio answered, firmer than ever. "And we will. Because this isn't only about inheritance. This is about dignity." At that moment, the registry felt like an arena. All eyes were fixed on the scene, caught between shock and the lesson unfolding before them. Maria sat again, exhausted, but with her head held high. Antonio gathered the documents, tucked them back into the folder, and turned to the clerk. "Miss, prepare the update. I want it recorded that, from today on, the beneficiaries are different, not the ones who turned their backs on us." The clerk nodded, uneasy but resolute. She took the papers and began typing, turning what had once been pain into strength. Outside, thunder rolled for the first time that afternoon, as if the universe itself confirmed the decision. Roberto and Clara exchanged nervous glances. There was nothing left to say. Their silence was the loudest confession of all. Antonio exhaled, and before sitting down again, spoke the words that sealed the moment. "You left us with hunger and thirst. Now life feeds our dignity and starves your greed." Rain poured hard that afternoon, as if the sky was washing away the dust of the road, and with it, the burden Maria and Antonio had carried in their hearts. As they left the registry, still clutching the folder against their chest, the first drops ran down their faces. Maria lifted her eyes and let herself be soaked, as if each drop was a baptism of dignity. Demas and Agenor walked with them to the simple car that belonged to the restaurant owner. The sound of rain hitting the rusty roof played like an old song, the kind that carries memories. "You'll need shelter," said Agenor, turning the key in the ignition. "My house is simple, but my doors are open. You can rest there, eat properly, and think about what comes next." Maria tried to object, but her voice came out faint. "We don't want to trouble you." "Trouble would be leaving you here with no direction," Demas cut in firmly. "Ungrateful children abandon their parents. Friends are the ones who reach out." The two elders exchanged a look. Their eyes carried so much weight, yet also a spark lit by kindness. They accepted. Egino's house was in a modest neighborhood behind his diner, a small brick place, narrow porch, and the smell of fresh coffee always lingering. His wife, Mrs. Cedar, opened the door with a wide smile, no explanation needed. "Welcome. Come in. This is your home now." Maria couldn't hold back her tears. She was greeted with a long hug, the kind that warms even weary bones. Antonio, more reserved, shook Agenor's hand and murmured, "Thank you. It's been a long time since we were welcomed like this." Inside, the sofa was worn but clean. The small table had a floral cloth. On the shelf were family photos. The place was modest, but it carried a warmth no mansion their children owned could match. Mrs. Cedar served hot soup with fresh bread. Maria took her first spoonful and closed her eyes, feeling her body recharge. It's amazing how something so simple can bring life back. "Simple, but made with care," Cedar replied. "That's worth more than gold." As they ate, Agenor started the talk. "You need to think about your next step. Those documents change everything. But the most important part is this. You're not alone. If you want, tomorrow I'll introduce you to a lawyer in town. He's an honest man, has helped plenty of folks here." Antonio nodded, still serious. "I want to do this right. No rushing, but no neglect either. If life gave us this chance, we have to honor it." Maria sighed deeply. "Antonio, I still don't understand. Why keep this hidden so long? Why not tell me?" He looked at his wife with tenderness and pain. "Because I was afraid, Maria. Afraid of turning hope into a fight. Afraid the boys would tear each other apart over a piece of paper. I thought hiding it would protect everyone. But I was wrong. They dug their own pit of ingratitude." Demas, sitting quietly in the corner, added, "And it's not your fault. The mistake wasn't hiding it. The mistake was trusting people who never valued it." Maria lowered her head. Part of her still longed for her children's repentance, but another part, growing stronger, began to accept that love doesn't always come from blood. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the small kitchen window, lighting up the simple space. The smell of brewed coffee filled the air. Maria helped Mrs. Cedar set the table, their chatter like that of old friends. "You don't know how much it means to be heard, Cedar," Maria said, her eyes shining. "We all need someone to listen, my friend. And I know what it's like to wait for love where it doesn't exist. I've learned family is also who chooses to stay." Soon after, Antonio walked in with the folder under his arm. "It's time. Let's talk to the lawyer." The lawyer Agenor had mentioned was Dr. Renato, middle-aged, calm voice, serious posture. He welcomed them in his modest office, stacked with files, smelling of old paper. "So, what do we have here?" he asked, flipping through the documents Antonio handed him. As he read, his face shifted. First curiosity, then surprise, finally the smile of someone who just found something valuable. "My friends, what you hold here is a fortune disguised as forgotten paper. The accumulated participation over these years. It's much bigger than you think. We're talking figures that could secure comfort for generations." Maria pressed a hand to her chest, breathless. "Is that really possible?" "Not only possible, but fully legal," the lawyer replied. "And there's something even stronger. The abandonment clause. That guarantees the children who committed the shameful act you described have no claim. The inheritance goes straight to whoever you name as successors." Antonio nodded, resolute. "Then I want it recorded. If one day we're gone, I want this wealth to go to those who truly welcomed us, to those who gave us dignity when our own stripped it away." Dr. Renato smiled with respect. "I can prepare the paperwork. But know this. Your decision will spark conflict. When your children find out, they'll fight even without rights," Antonio answered in a low but firm voice. "They already fought against us once. We're not afraid anymore." Meanwhile, in a luxury house across town, Roberto and Clara argued furiously. "I can't believe he registered it. I was sure I could take it first." Clara paced back and forth, nervous. "It's over now. The registry confirmed everything. We've lost. They'll hand that money to anyone but us." Roberto slammed his fist on the table. "I won't accept it. If I have to, I'll drag them through court." No matter how long it takes. Paolo, the youngest, who had stayed quiet until then, finally spoke. Don't you get it? This isn't about money. It's about what we did. We abandoned them. They won't forgive us, and they shouldn't. The older siblings glared at him with disdain, but inside Paolo, something different was stirring. Regret. Back at Agenor's house that night, Maria and Antonio sat on the porch, listening to the crickets sing. The cool night air brought them a peace they hadn't felt in a long time. "Do you see it, Maria?" Antonio asked, gazing at the starry sky. "See what, Antonio?" "That sometimes life strips us of everything just to show us who really stands by our side. We didn't lose children. They lost themselves from us." Maria rested her head on his shoulder in silence. For the first time in years, she felt they weren't alone. Simple, genuine people had shown them more value than any luxury ever could. And in their hearts, something new began to grow. Not only the thirst for justice, but the certainty that the inheritance wouldn't go to the ungrateful. It would go to those who truly saw their worth. In Roberto's luxury home, the silence was suffocating. The white, cold walls couldn't hide the tension spreading through the halls. Clara paced back and forth, her heels echoing like hammers. Roberto sat on the couch, a folder of business papers open, though he couldn't read a single line. "I still can't believe Father did this," Clara snapped, stomping her foot. "He really went to the registry, signed the papers, and cut us out, as if we were nothing." Roberto rubbed his face with both hands, frustrated. "I told you he was stubborn. I thought since he told me about that land years ago, he'd keep me on his side, but looks like he decided to get revenge." Paolo, sitting in a chair across the room, finally spoke. "It's not revenge, Roberto. It's consequence. We abandoned them. We left our own parents on the road. What did you expect? That they'd come running back, grateful?" Clara spun on him, furious. "Shut up, Paolo. You've always been the saint, the quiet one. But you were in the car with us. You didn't do a thing to stop it. So don't act all righteous now." Paolo felt the sting, but kept his gaze steady. "You're right. I was wrong too. But you two keep making it worse. You still think it's about money, when what we did can't be measured." Roberto jumped up suddenly, his eyes burning with rage. "Money is power, Paolo. Without it, we're nothing. And I won't be left out. If they want to play hard, I'll drag this through court for as long as it takes." Clara crossed her arms and nodded. "And I'm with you. What's ours, no one takes." The next morning, a rumor spread through the small town. The couple abandoned on the road had left the registry with important documents. In places like this, secrets never last. At the market, the bakery, the salon, everyone whispered. "Did you hear? Looks like the old couple found a huge inheritance." "Yeah, and the kids dumped them on the roadside. Now, this will be something to watch." The gossip spread like wildfire and soon reached Roberto and Clara. When they read the confirmation on Roberto's phone, a message from a friend who worked near the registry, their world seemed to collapse. "So it's true," Roberto muttered. "They really do have something big in their hands." Clara clutched the phone to her chest, breathing heavily. "If this gets around town, we'll be a joke. What will people say? That we abandoned our parents and lost the inheritance too?" Roberto's eyes hardened as he stared at his sister. "I won't accept that. If I have to, we'll hunt down those documents. They can't just cut us off like this." Meanwhile, at Agenor's modest house, the mood was the opposite. Maria helped Donacida prepare lunch, chopping vegetables and laughing at old stories. Antonio, at the table, calmly reviewed the papers, while Demas shared news he'd heard about upcoming projects in the district. "Mr. Antonio, this district's going to grow even more. They're already talking about building another access road to the main highway. That means your share could triple in no time." Antonio shook his head, still in disbelief. "And to think that patch of land was once a joke. How many times did I hear people say, 'You bought useless brush'? Well, now, the brush turned to gold." Maria sighed, emotional. "What hurts is that our own children never saw anything in us beyond what they could take. They never cared how we felt." With simple wisdom, Donacida replied, That's because their hearts got spoiled by abundance. When someone never goes without, they forget to value. But you two, you know the price of every piece of bread. That's what makes the difference. That same day, Roberto showed up at the registry again, Clara by his side. They walked in with heads high, as if they still had authority. "We want access to the record for Faixa da Serra, Lot 14B, Roberto demanded. The clerk met them with a cold stare. "Sorry, but you're not authorized. The holder is Mr. Antonio, and any changes or access can only be made by him or someone he legally designates." Clara tried to argue. "We're his children." "Oh, ChatGPT disse, doesn't that give us the right?" The clerk was blunt. "No, there's a restriction clause in cases of abandonment. And according to the statement filed yesterday, abandonment was made clear. You have no rights." It was like a heavy iron door slamming in their faces. Roberto stormed out fuming, while Clara cried out of rage. "They can't do this. They can't," she kept repeating. Roberto walked fast, fists clenched. "They can, and they did, but I'm not stopping here. If the law's against us, we'll find another way." That night, Paolo went to Roberto's house. He was restless but needed to talk. He found his brother drinking, a whiskey bottle already half empty. "Roberto, stop this. Don't you see you're digging an even deeper hole? They're hurt, and they should be. We should be asking for forgiveness, not fighting for money." Roberto laughed with disdain. "Forgiveness doesn't fill wallets, Paolo. Forgiveness doesn't pay bills, but it fills the heart." The youngest shot back firmly. "I don't want this inheritance. I want our parents back, and if you were smart, you'd want the same." Roberto hurled the glass against the wall, shattering it. "Get out before I lose my temper." Paolo left with his head down, but determined he wouldn't follow his siblings' path. If there was any chance of winning back his parents' love, he'd try. The next morning, Maria and Antonio were on Agenor's porch when they saw Paolo walking up slowly, head lowered. He stopped at the gate, silent, as if words refused to come out. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice breaking. Maria's heart raced. Antonio narrowed his eyes, suspicious. "That depends, Paolo. Are you coming as a son or as an heir?" The young man swallowed hard, lifting tearful eyes. "I'm coming as a son, as someone who failed badly but doesn't want to lose you. I want nothing but forgiveness." Maria burst into tears. Antonio stayed serious, but something inside him shifted. "If you were in the parents' place, would you accept a child's regret even after being abandoned? Or would it already be too late? Share your opinion in the comments." Paolo stood frozen at the gate, every second a confession. The rain had passed, but puddles still mirrored the washed sky. Maria clutched her chest. Antonio stood tall, watchful. From the porch, Donatilla gently unlatched the gate and said softly, "Come in, my boy. Anyone who asks for water with honesty deserves a clean cup." Paolo stepped forward, 2 steps, then 2 more, and stopped before his parents. He didn't try to hug them. He pulled from his bag a box of medicine, fresh fruit, and a brown envelope. I brought Mum's prescriptions updated, bought Dad's blood pressure pills, and I found this in the back of my drawer." He held out the envelope. Maria recognized the old handwriting in the corner. "Our beginning." She opened it carefully. Inside were faded photos, the lease for their first grocery, and a note written by Antonio in the middle of the night. "Today I sold my watch, but I bought a lower fever for our boy." Maria pressed the paper to her face, and the long-lost scent of home returned like a breeze. "Why was this with you, Paolo?" Antonio asked. Not harsh, but guarded. "Because when you closed the grocery, I saved whatever I could from the last drawer. I knew one day we'd need to remember who we were." No speeches followed, only silence, the kind that unchains a heart. Antonio pointed to a chair. "Sit. Anyone who wants to start over must first rest." Agenor's home filled with simple voices. Demas arrived carrying 2 new tiles to patch an old leak on the porch. The neighbor, Naldo, showed up with a sack of cement left over from work and offered a small crew to fix the cracked floor. The kids from the street stacked books to balance a wobbly table, all done without a price tag, only with goodwill. Paolo watched quietly, caught between strangeness and shame. In his world, help always came with receipts, invoices, strings attached. Not here. Here, strong coffee paid for hammer swings. A bowl of porridge settled 100 favors. He grabbed a broom, then another. He swept the yard, cleared the leaves, replaced the kitchen bulb, climbed the roof with Dimas, steadied the ladder for Naldo. Nobody told him. He just did it. "This is what real people do when they ask for forgiveness," whispered Donacida to Maria. "They speak with their hands." Maria, eyes brimming, murmured back, "I don't know if I trust yet. But I want to learn to see without the pain getting in the way." Antonio, meanwhile, studied Paolo like a man searching for cracks, and also for light seeping through. At day's end he called his son. "Let's go to the market, Paolo. I need to see how you walk among people." The two went side by side, like strangers who once were close. On the way, whispers followed. "That's the son of the couple from the roadside. They say the inheritance is huge. He abandoned them and now wants a slice." Paolo's face burned. A woman in an apron, wiping her hands on a towel, stopped them. "Mr. Antonio, the whole town has its say, but here's mine. You've always had open hands. If you're receiving now, it's no miracle. It's harvest." Antonio thanked her. Paolo, throat tight, only nodded. At the vegetable stand, the vendor refused payment. "This one's on the house, Mr. Antonio." The old man smiled and left 2 bills on the counter anyway. "Charity only counts when it doesn't humiliate. I pay, and you give me a friend's discount." Paolo soaked in those words like it was a lesson. That night, Dr. Renato arrived with a bundle of papers and an honest spark in his eyes. He sat at the plain table, laid out a hand-drawn chart. "I spoke with a colleague who specializes in estate planning. My advice, set up a trust, a fund with clear rules. In it, you choose beneficiaries and social goals. That way, we block legal harassment and turn the inheritance into legacy, not into fuel for fights." Antonio nodded. Maria asked, "Social goals?" Renato counted on his fingers. 1. A monthly stipend for abandoned elders in town. Steady, quiet, no fuss. 2. Scholarships for local youth who want vocational training. 3. A small health fund for basic medicine, managed by a reputable group. 4. And if you agree, a reserve for those who once knocked at your grocery hungry and left with thick-cut bread without paying. Maria cried again, but this time without shame. "I want that. I want our memory to be bread on someone's table." Paolo took a deep breath, swallowing hard. He knew that plan cut him further from any share, and part of him, the child still inside, ached. But he didn't complain. Instead, he said quietly, "I can volunteer. I can carry boxes, do registrations, deliver food baskets. I just don't want to be remembered as the son from the roadside." Antonio said nothing. He opened the folder, pulled out a photo of Paolo at 8, pushing a grocery cart bigger than him. He flipped it over and read the line he'd written on the back 2 decades ago. "He pushes the world without knowing." He slid the photo toward his son. "Push it again." Across town, Roberto and Clara were planning their counterattack. A slick lawyer, wide watch on his wrist and a thin smile, scribbled options on a whiteboard. "If abandonment was recognized, the clause is strong, but we can push 2 angles. 1, legal capacity, claim Mr. Antonio was influenced, didn't fully grasp what he was signing. 2, shared ingratitude, build a story of past mistreatment that justified distance." Clara bit her lip. "You can really do that." "I can make noise," the lawyer replied. "And sometimes noise buys time. Time wears the other side down." Roberto nodded. He didn't want justice. He wanted fatigue. He wanted his parents to let go out of exhaustion. The next morning, Agenor's porch looked like a construction site. Naldo was laying cement, Dimas testing the roof patch, kids carrying buckets of water, Donacida frying donuts. Paolo was sawing a plank when a black car stopped across the street. Two men in suits stepped out, holding envelopes sealed with red ribbons. "Extrajudicial notice," said the cold-voiced one, handing it to Antonio. "Challenge of capacity and petition for guardianship." Renato, arriving with more documents, stepped forward. He read quickly, brow furrowed, then explained to all, "They'll try to claim you don't know what you're doing and ask to manage your estate for your benefit. It's a polite way of stealing from the inside." Maria went pale. Paolo shut his eyes, as if struck. Roberto and Clara, at a distance inside the car, watched through tinted windows. The scene needed an audience. They always needed one. Antonio lifted his head. His voice came out clean, steady, without a shake. "I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'll prove it. Here, with firm signature and full memory." Renato pulled a new document from his case. "I scheduled an evaluation with an independent medical expert for this afternoon. I also filed for autonomous guardianship to shield the estate decisions already made. We'll stand our ground." Paolo stepped forward, placing himself between his parents and the suited men. "Tell your client this. If he wants to wear us out, he'll have to walk farther than we walked down that road." The messengers backed off, surprised at the firmness. They returned to the car. The engine roared, and the vehicle vanished at the corner like a promise of storm. The work on the house didn't stop. Maybe the best answer to poison is the sound of a home being repaired. With every hammer strike, it felt like another piece of dignity was nailed back into place. By late afternoon, the porch was dry, the floor level, the table steady. Donacida laid out the flowered cloth, Maria served the donuts, Dimas told bad jokes, Naldo teased about cement stuck in his beard. Laughter. Rare, timid, but laughter. Antonio, sitting at the head of the table, asked for silence. "I want to say two things. First, thank you. You who have little gave us the much we lacked. Second, today I decided something." All eyes turned. Antonio laid his hand on Paolo's arm. "Forgiveness isn't a stamp. It's a road. You've taken the first steps. Now you'll walk further. Tomorrow morning, you're coming with me and Dr. Renato to meet the expert. You'll sign as witness to our decisions. And if you stay steady, you'll have a place in the trust's work, not as an heir of money, but as a keeper of our name." Paolo wept silently. He nodded again and again, speaking with his body. Maria finally hugged him. Not a showy hug, but the kind that feels like coming home and locking the door from inside. As night fell, the yellow porch light revealed a shadow standing at the end of the street. Roberto. He watched the family scene, the smell of food, the low hum of the radio, the peace he had never bought. He stayed for a minute, 2, 3, then slipped into the dark, carrying with him the only asset he still didn't know how to measure, the chance to return. Inside, Dr. Renato tucked the papers into his briefcase, and Antonio, worn but steady, whispered, "Tomorrow, we prove to the law what life already knows." Outside, clouds gathered again at the horizon, and under the first cool breeze of night, something whispered in every ear, "The storm isn't over, but now there's shelter." By morning, the town buzzed with chatter. The registry office brimmed with murmurs, the square spoke out loud, and even the local radio slipped in a vague note about an elderly couple possibly tied to a forgotten fortune. What had been secret was now street news. Meanwhile, at Agenor's house, Antonio put on his best shirt, old but neatly pressed, and combed his white hair in front of a cracked mirror. Maria watched each movement with tenderness and fear. "Antonio, are you sure? Today will be heavy." He drew a deep breath. "Maria, yesterday they tried to call me unfit. Today, I'll prove, with my voice and my memory, that I know exactly what I'm doing, not for pride, but because it's time to name things right." Paolo entered just then, face set. "I'm ready, Dad. I'm going with you." Antonio studied him in silence for a few seconds, then simply nodded. The medical examiner's office sat downtown, a building with wide windows and the scent of old paper. Dr. Renato waited at the door, calm, The kind of calm that knows each step must be careful. Today isn't just an exam, it's a symbol. If we walk out with a positive report, their entire strategy collapses. Maria gripped her husband's hand. Paolo stayed just behind, like a protective shadow. The evaluation was long. The doctor asked about dates, historical events, names, numbers. Antonio answered each with sharp clarity, recalling even details about when he opened the grocery, the year the flood ruined the neighborhood, the exact date of his wedding. The doctor jotted notes and sometimes smiled. "Mr. Antonio, you've got the memory of a living archive. Rest assured, I'll certify full capacity. No one can take away your right to decide." Maria sighed with relief. Paolo squeezed his father's hand in quiet pride. At the same hour, across town, Roberto and Clara heard the news that the evaluation had ended. A contact at the registry whispered, "No way to topple it. He passed with flying colors. Your lawyer's out of arguments." Roberto slammed the table, furious. "Then we appeal. If not incapacity, then pressure. We'll wear them down until they break." "I won't lose." Clara's face tightened. "And if they donate it all, if they hand it to that trucker, the restaurant owner, anyone, we're left with nothing." Roberto smirked, eyes cold. "Then we act fast, before they sign everything in stone." That afternoon, Dr. Renato led Maria and Antonio to the courthouse to file the final documents. The medical report, the updated beneficiaries, the creation of the trust fund. The waiting room was hushed, but their hearts thundered. "You realize what's coming, don't you?" Renato asked. "From today on, this isn't just about property. You're touching pride, power, greed. Their backlash may be harsh." Antonio replied firmly, "We were left on the roadside. Nothing hits harder than that. The rest we can take." Maria clutched the folder. Paolo stayed close, unshaken. As the papers were stamped, something unusual happened. A small crowd of ordinary folks gathered outside the courthouse. A woman brought flowers. A young man handed over a thank you letter for the help he'd once received at their store. Even a child showed up with a crayon drawing of a smiling couple. Maria's eyes welled up. "They hardly know us, yet offer more kindness than our own children ever did." Antonio smiled for the first time in days. "They know the worth of gratitude, and that's worth more than any will." By day's end, with documents signed, the small crowd clapped softly as the couple stepped out. It wasn't spectacle, it was respect. Paolo walked beside his parents, for the first time in years feeling part of something real. But the scene was watched from afar. Roberto and Clara, hidden in a dark car, stared with stone eyes. "They already signed," Clara muttered, biting her lip. "Then we play another card," Roberto shot back. "Tomorrow I'll file for an asset freeze. If they think they've won, they're about to learn what war is." That night, Agenor's house was full. The scent of homemade food, laughter of neighborhood kids, simple talk filled the rooms. Dimas told road tales. Donacida poured coffee. Maria and Antonio sat on the worn sofa, eyes misty. "Do you feel it, Antonio?" Maria asked. "I feel it, Maria. For the first time in so long, I feel we aren't alone." Paolo, helping clear the table, stopped and looked at them. "I know I can't erase what I did, but I want to prove with every act that I can still be your son." Antonio looked at him, then allowed a tired but genuine smile to form. "Then so be it. Being a son isn't a title. It's a daily choice." Meanwhile, in a sleek downtown office, Roberto signed papers with the lawyer, whose smile was all sharp edges. "Petition's ready. Tomorrow we'll file for the freeze. It'll drag for months, maybe years. With luck, we force a deal. What matters is keeping them tied down." Clara nodded. "If they think they'll turn this inheritance into some legacy, they'll have to fight hard. And we know how to fight." Roberto lit a cigar, eyes staring into nothing. "They think they've won. Tomorrow the real battle begins." The courthouse was packed the next morning. Cold walls, wooden benches groaning, the muffled buzz of townsfolk who came only to witness the climax of a story already whispered across every corner. In the center, on a heavy oak table, rested the folder with documents that could shift fates. Maria adjusted the scarf at her neck, heart pounding. Antonio, steady at her side, kept a calm face but eyes sharp on every detail. Paolo, seated just behind, was torn between nerves and hope. Across the room, Roberto and Clara appeared polished and poised, but their hardened stares made it clear they were there for battle. The judge opened the session with a grave voice. "We are here for the reading and confirmation of the easement registry for Parcel 14B of Faixa da Serra, with clauses established by the title holder, Mr. Antonio." A deep silence blanketed the hall. The judge opened the file, leafing through slowly until reaching the heart of the matter. It states here, accumulated and retroactive participation in revenues from the industrial district, under the names of Antonio da Silva and Maria da Silva. Updated amount? His voice halted, as though the weight of the figure demanded pause. Updated value exceeds several million reais. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Maria clutched her chest, struggling for breath. Paolo closed his eyes, throat tight. Roberto and Clara's eyes widened, their faces lit with raw greed. "Millions," Clara whispered, barely hiding her smile. The judge pressed on. "However, there is a clear clause in the original deed. In the event of manifest abandonment by descendants, they forfeit rights to succession or participation." Roberto shot to his feet. "Objection! This is outrageous. That document was tampered with, or else my father didn't know what he was signing." The judge raised his hand, restoring order. "Mr. Antonio underwent a recent medical evaluation, certified as fully capable. Furthermore, this clause was registered over 20 years ago with public faith. There is no tampering here, only foresight of something that sadly came to pass." Maria wept softly. Antonio's voice rang clear. "I didn't foresee it because I doubted my children. I foresaw it because I knew life is treacherous, and today life showed who stood beside us and who left us on the roadside." Roberto pressed on. "But we are your blood. You can't just cut us off." That was when Paolo rose. His voice shook at first, then steadied. "Being blood doesn't make you a son. Being there does. I made mistakes too. I was in that car, but I came back. I asked forgiveness. I'm here to carry weight, not reap profit. If you want money, take it. I only want to reclaim my parents." The words fell heavy, and Maria turned to her youngest, tears streaming, and embraced him in front of everyone. Antonio simply nodded, proud. The judge continued, ignoring Roberto and Clara's fury. "By the decision of the title holder, confirmed in updated registry, the beneficiaries of the trust shall be the couple themselves during their lifetime, and afterward the fund will support designated social causes, with Mr. Paolo da Silva serving as executor of the legacy." Clara snapped, unable to hold back. "You've lost your minds. You'll give all this to strangers, to poor people, to those who don't even know who you are?" Maria stood, her voice shaky but stronger than ever. "Better to the poor who are grateful than to children who are not. You had our home, our bread, our sweat, and you repaid us with abandonment on the roadside. This inheritance is not money, it is dignity, and dignity is not for sale." The hall responded with a quiet, respectful applause, not loud clapping, but a shared sign of approval. Roberto, enraged, stepped toward his father. "You'll regret this. I'll appeal. File suits, fight until I take back what's mine." Antonio met his eyes without flinching. "What's yours, Roberto? The car that carried you away from us? The contempt you showed on the road? The money that never reached our hands? What you had has already been spent in greed. What remains here is what we built with honesty, and that does not belong to you." The words echoed like judgment. Roberto faltered, unable to answer. Clara tugged his arm, trying to drag him from disgrace. When the session closed, Dr. Renato handed the couple an official copy of the documents. Paolo carried the folder. Maria, eyes wet, whispered, "Antonio, it feels like today we buried part of the pain." He looked straight ahead and replied, "And planted another, but this time one that can bear good fruit." As they stepped outside, the townsfolk waiting at the door greeted them with hugs, flowers, even whispered prayers. To them, Antonio and Maria were no longer just an elderly couple abandoned by their children. They had become a symbol of justice, memory, and resilience. Across the street, Roberto and Clara watched with bottled-up rage. "They'll pay for this, Clara. If not in court, then by pressure. We can't walk away defeated." Clara drew a long breath, but deep down she knew the loss had already been sealed, not by the judge, but by the choice they made back on that roadside. Inside, the courthouse still carried the echo of the last words, when the judge announced the final reading of the will. It was the climax of a play, with everyone waiting for the decisive strike. Maria squeezed Antonio's hand tightly, as if this moment were their last crossing together. The clerk broke the seal of the envelope. Its stamp faded with age. The sound of paper tearing made every heart race. The judge cleared his throat and read aloud, leaving no room for doubt. "I, Antonio da Silva, in full conscience, declare that after my passing and that of my wife, the assets related to Lot 14B of Faixa da Serra, as well as all future and retroactive revenues, shall compose a social support fund. This fund will be managed by representatives chosen by us in life, with executor our son Paulo da Silva, should he remain faithful to the commitment of honor and care. To other descendants, in case of manifest abandonment, I declare the complete exclusion of any right." The room erupted in murmurs. Some applauded softly. Others exchanged shocked glances. Roberto shot up, his face red with fury. "This is absurd. A will crafted just to humiliate us. We are the rightful children. You can't erase us from the family's story." The judge cut him off firmly. "The will is fully legal, confirmed by expert evaluation and registry certification. Nothing here is irregular. Mr. Antonio exercised his right to decide the destiny of what he built." Clara rose as well, tears in her eyes, not from regret, but from frustration. "You're destroying your own family, handing everything to strangers, turning us into a joke in front of the entire town." Maria couldn't stay silent. "You destroyed it when you left us on that road. What we do now is only reaping what you planted." Paulo, eyes brimming, asked to speak. "Judge, if I may, I know I failed. I was in that car. But today I understand. No inheritance pays the price of abandoning your parents. If they trusted me to run this fund, I won't use it to grow rich. I'll use it to honor their name. That's a promise." The entire room fell silent. Maria embraced her youngest son before everyone, overcome. Antonio laid a hand on his shoulder and said, "Be the son the road couldn't kill." Roberto raged on. "You'll regret this. I'll appeal to the last day of my life. I'll prove this will was made just to destroy us." But the judge's tone was final. "The process is closed. The decisions are valid and irrevocable. You may appeal, but the documents are legally shielded. The law protects those who acted justly." Roberto slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing like defeat. Clara, drained, hurried out, hiding her face. Outside, as Maria and Antonio crossed the gates, they were met by a humble crowd. Simple people applauded, handed flowers and offered embraces. "You're an example to all of us," shouted one woman. "You proved life still has justice," said another. Maria wept, not from grief this time, but relief. Antonio, though weary, felt lighter. For the first time in years, the dignity stripped from them on that road seemed restored. Paulo walked alongside, supporting his mother, eyes red with emotion. He knew he now carried a heavy burden, but also a chance at redemption. Farther away, on a street corner, Roberto glared. Clara clutched his arm, nervous. "It's over, Roberto. They won. There's nothing left to do." But he refused. "It's not over. One day they'll need something, and when they do, I'll be there to remind them they took everything from me." Clara said nothing. Deep down, she knew it wasn't their parents who had taken. They themselves had thrown it all away. That night, back at Agenor's modest home, Maria and Antonio sat on the porch. The cool breeze carried the scent of damp earth. In the distance, the laughter of children filled the air. "Do you feel it, Antonio?" Maria asked. "I do, Maria." What seemed like a curse turned into a blessing. The road wasn't our end. It was the start of a justice that took time, but arrived. Paolo walked over with 3 cups of coffee. He sat beside them, silent, just listening to the sounds of the night. There was no luxury, no gold on display, but there was peace. And in that moment, the 3 understood. The greatest inheritance wasn't in figures, but in the value of rising again when everyone expects your fall. The morning sun lit the porch of Agenor's house, where Maria and Antonio sat holding hands in wooden chairs. Their faces no longer showed weariness, but serenity. The pain of the road, though never forgotten, had turned into strength. Maria watched the neighborhood children playing, running barefoot and laughing loud. There was more life in that simple scene than in any silent mansion. "Antonio, do you see it? We ended up here as if we had lost everything, and now it feels like we gained more than we ever imagined." He nodded, eyes fixed ahead. "Life has its turns, Maria. The gold our children craved turned into gold of justice, and we found family where we least expected." Paolo appeared at the door, holding a new folder. He walked over with respect and said, "Father, Mother, Dr. Renato helped me put together the first report of the trust. We already have scholarships ready for 3 local students, and also support for 2 abandoned elders. It's still little, but it's a start." Maria smiled through tears. "My son, this is the kind of inheritance no one can ever steal." Antonio placed his hand on Paolo's shoulder. "I was wrong to think wealth was only what you kept on paper. Today I see it. Wealth is what multiplies into dignity." Meanwhile, across town, Roberto and Clara faced the hangover of defeat. The luxurious house felt larger and emptier. The expensive furniture no longer brought pride, only the reminder of the void they had chosen. Clara wept silently in front of the mirror, as if trying to find some trace of who she once was. "Roberto, did we really do everything wrong?" But he refused to admit it. He paced like a caged beast. "Wrong was them cutting us out. We just sped up what was going to happen anyway." Deep down, though, they both knew their image in town was stained. They weren't remembered as heirs, but as ungrateful children. The punishment of memory was heavier than any sentence in court. Days later, Maria and Antonio were invited to a small ceremony at the community hall. The simple event had makeshift flowers, wooden benches, and dozens of humble people present. A young woman took the stage, tears in her eyes, and said, "If it weren't for the scholarship, I couldn't have continued my technical course. Thank you for believing in me." An elderly man stood next, leaning on a cane. "I was going to sleep without medicine. Today, thanks to this fund, I have my treatment guaranteed. You gave me more years of life." Maria couldn't hold back her tears. Antonio discreetly wiped his eyes, touched. Paolo, standing beside them, held his chest high, pride burning inside him. "Do you see, Maria?" Antonio whispered. "This is it. This is the fruit of the road. It wasn't in vain." When they returned home that night, they found an envelope under the door. No sender. Antonio opened and read in silence. The words were rushed but heavy. "Father and Mother, I don't know if I can still call you that. I know I was wrong. I know abandonment has no easy forgiveness. But seeing all you're doing made me realize that we were the ones who lost you. Signed, Clara." Maria covered her face, shaken. Antonio folded the letter and put it in the drawer. Maybe one day she'll truly understand. For now, let time speak. On the porch before bed, Maria looked up at the starry sky. "Antonio, do you think one day they'll truly come back?" He drew a deep breath. "I don't know, Maria. But I no longer wait for them. Now I wait for life. And life has already given us more than we asked. It gave us back our peace." Paolo came over carrying 3 cups of coffee. He sat between them in silence. At that moment, they weren't 3 people trying to erase the past. They were a family rebuilt, learning that love can be born again, even after pain. Across the city, Roberto stared through the window of the dark mansion. The silence of the house echoed uncomfortably. Everything he owned now felt hollow, because the greatest treasure was where he could no longer reach, in the hearts of his parents, and he knew this was the true inheritance he had lost forever. If you were in the place of these parents, could you open your heart to the ungrateful children when they came asking forgiveness? Or would you let life take its course without looking back? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you made it this far, like the video and help us by sharing this story with your friends and family. Your interaction is important for the growth of the channel. Until the next story.